But let's take a minute to, all right, let's just start with watching our breath, maybe like 10 counts to kind of put our mind into neutral. And then when your mind is in that neutral space, take a minute to reflect on your motivation for joining the class tonight. And to the extent that you're able, really try to imagine that you could become an enlightened being and help countless sentient beings. And try to connect with that highest motivation. Just imagine what it would be like if your own mind had complete love and compassion for every living being. If your own mind was unobstructed with thoughts of selfishness or fear, if your own mind was completely at peace and you were able to be present for the needs of others without any hesitation. So with that motivation, let's go for refuge. And we'll do the prayer once in English. We can offer a mandala. We can offer a mandala first. Sajipuki Shushin Meito Dramri Ram Minji Ni Degyan Padi Sangye Jingdu Mite Uwagi Rokuna Dajin Chopam Shoviram Ratnamandalakam Niryatayami. So that's actually offering up totally pure universe world to enlightened beings. And I will go for refuge, first in English and then twice in Tibetan. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye churang soki chognam la, changchu badu dagni kyapsu chi, dagi janyan gibe sonam ki, trola penshil sangye drupa sho, sangye churang soki chognam la, changchu badu dagni kyapsu chi, dagi janyan gibe sonam ki, trola penshil sangye drupa sho. So, hey, it's so nice to see you. So I thought today I wanted to talk about, last time we talked a bit about refuge and renunciation and impermanence and kind of what the benefit of having that mind has. And I thought today I wanted to actually go through a lamrim, one of the lamrims. So I mentioned at the beginning of the last class that there's many different presentations of lamrim, which means the stages of the path or the steps that you have to go through. And you can think of those steps as realizations that we cultivate in our own mind. And there's many, many presentations. Like, Lama Tsongkhapa, the Lamrim Chenmo, we talked about, lamp on the path, liberation in the palm of your hand. And then today I sent Michael a brief version, Lama Tsongkhapa's principal aspects of the path, or 3 principal paths. And I think I may have spoken about it last time, but those 3 principal aspects of the path, or 3 principal paths, are renunciation, which we did talk about quite a bit last time, and impermanence, which helps you to develop that renunciation, and the truth of suffering, which also helps to develop that renunciation. So we talked a bit about that. And then bodhicitta, which is great compassion. And then the last one is wisdom, or correct view, also known as emptiness. So an understanding of emptiness, but more importantly, a realization of that. In fact, a realization of all 3 of those things in our own minds, so that they're uncontrived and just naturally abiding. But so I thought it would be nice to run through and read through a short lamrim, that text, which you shared, Michael, and I'm looking for, what is that? Perfect.
I put a copy in the chat, but I also have it on screen. So when you're reading it, I'll put it up, and when you're not reading it, we're discussing it, I'll take it down.
Perfect. So if you don't mind, I think it would be really nice to just kind of recite it. It's super brief. And then we'll focus on some key parts. And I actually have it open on another screen too, so I can kind of go back. So it starts out with the expressing homage. So all Buddhist texts, when you look at them, begin this way. So we talked also last week about one of the first steps on the path is reliance on a spiritual teacher. And so this homage, this is classic for Buddhist texts, which are to acknowledge the teachers, acknowledge the Buddhas, and acknowledge the lineage from which the teachings came. So Lama Tsongkhapa, I guess I'm giving commentary instead of just reciting it. Maybe we should just recite it once and then we'll talk about it. I bow down to my perfect gurus. The essential meaning of the victorious one's teaching, the path praised by all the holy victors and their children, the gateway of the fortunate ones desiring liberation. This I shall try to explain as much as I can. Those who are not attached to the pleasures of cycling samsara, who strive to make freedom and endowments meaningful, who entrust themselves to the path pleasing the victorious ones, you fortunate ones, listen with a calm mind. Freedom and endowments are difficult to find, and life has no time to spare. By gaining familiarity with this, attraction to the appearances of this life is reversed. By thinking over and over again, their actions and their effects are unbetraying, and repeatedly contemplating the miseries of psychic existence, attraction to the appearances of future lives is reversed. When, by having trained in that way, there is no arising, even for a second, of attraction to the perfections of psychic existence, and all day and night the intention seeking liberation arises, then the thought of renunciation has been generated. Even if renunciation has been developed, if it is not possessed by the mind of enlightenment, it does not become the cause of the perfect bliss of unsurpassed enlightenment. Therefore, the wise generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. Swept away by the current of the four powerful rivers, tied by the tight bonds of karma so hard to undo, caught in the iron net of self-grasping, completely enveloped by the total darkness of ignorance, ceaselessly tormented by the three sufferings, thinking that all mothers are in such a condition, generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. In short, if, like the mother whose cherished son has fallen into a pit of fire and who experiences even 1 second of his suffering as an unbearable eternity, your reflection on the suffering of all mother sentient beings has made it impossible for you to bear their suffering for even 1 second. And the wish seeking enlightenment for their sake arises without effort, then you've realized the supreme precious mind of enlightenment. Without the wisdom realizing ultimate reality, even though you've generated renunciation and the mind of enlightenment, you cannot cut the root cause of circling. Therefore, attempt the method to realize dependent arising. One who sees the cause and effect of all phenomena, of both psychic existence and the state beyond sorrow as forever unbetraying, and for whom any object trusted in by the grasping mind has completely disappeared, has at that time entered the path pleasing the Buddhas. If the apparent of dependent relation, which is unbetraying, is accepted separately from emptiness, and as long as they are seen as separate, then one has still not realized the Buddha's intent. If these two realizations are happening simultaneously without alternation, and from merely seeing dependent relation as completely unbetraying, the definite ascertainment comes that completely destroys the way all objects are apprehended as truly existent. At that time, the analysis of the ultimate view is complete. Furthermore, appearances eliminate the extreme of existence, and emptiness eliminates the extreme of non-existence.
If you
realize how emptiness manifests in the manner of cause and effect, then you are not captivated by wrong notions holding extreme views. In this way, you realize exactly the vital points of the three principal aspects of the path. Resort to seeking solitude, generate the power of effort, and quickly accomplish your final goal, my child. So these are the pith instruction. And I think I'm going to get out my computer glasses because much better. I can read so much better now. So I want to talk a little bit about, we covered the homage. The promise to compose, that's another thing, the intention, the motivation, and then asking us to listen. And then there's a brief kind of explaining what each of these realizations are, and then how we can know whether or not we've attained them. But I wanted to kind of run through. So there's a couple of things that are kind of presupposed assumptions or beliefs, and those would be the belief in past and future lives, which I think is important to kind of discuss, even though we're probably not going to prove that, and that wouldn't be the goal of this class anyway. But there are other discussions you can have to kind of explore that more deeply, and then also the laws of karma. So these two ideas, past and future lives and karma, are not things that we can see directly, obviously. And in fact, they say that karma and the workings of karma can only be seen by a Buddha. So many of you have taken a lot of classes with talk about emptiness and realizing emptiness, and that as and here also that's like this lofty goal. This is at the end, this correct view. Once you have that understanding, more than understanding, once you have that realization in your mind, you're very close to enlightenment. You've literally cut the root of all of suffering. So you are well on your way. But even more challenging than to see those directly is to see the workings of karma. So that's something that only an enlightened being can see. And so we have to have some kind of faith in those things. But we talked about, I kind of always go back to like, what does faith look like from a Buddhist perspective? Lord Buddha challenged us to challenge everything, right? The idea isn't to absorb someone else's kind of dogma or beliefs, but to actually cultivate realizations in our own mind. So that is beyond faith. That's experience. So we're on this path to gain those experiences. And when you gain those experiences, when you have those realizations, then you don't need faith for it. Then they're uncontrived. But for us, because we're not there, we have to have some logical reason to believe in these things. So again, I'm not going to belabor the point, but I always like thinking in terms when it comes to past and future lives. If you look at modern science, already there's so much discussion, so much literature about this, brain, mind, consciousness. What is the brain like the receiver? The broadcast is the thoughts and the mind, like which is generating which. That's a rich discussion. And also the idea of consciousness kind of just continuing like matter or energy, right? So, one moment of consciousness flops into another moment. So in that sense, there's a continuum that we can kind of see and experience. Now, at the point of death, we're not, I can't speak to that experience, but just, I think about, things like, just the continuation of matter and energy. Similarly, for me, I can suspend disbelief in past and future lives. And so one of the things I'll say is that it's important, even if you're not, convinced, it's okay not to be convinced of past and future lives. It's okay not to believe in past and future lives, like in a strong belief. But if you can suspend disbelief and maybe put some of those things on the back burner, and maybe use them as a working hypothesis, I think you'll find it really helpful. And actually developing a certainty that there's no such thing as karma and no such thing as past and future lives is actually a negative karma, which I don't know if I should tell you that, but it is. So I want to pause there because then I want to talk about karma, but just, are we all kind of okay with just a working hypothesis that there's past and future lives? Is that okay? And if anybody wants to kind of chat about it more, we can, but I just know we're not going to resolve it. So something to contemplate for a future. So the next one, karma, I think, even though it's difficult to see, I think the truth of karma resonates so much with us. Although usually it's like an ignorant idea of it. But I wanted to talk about, so I'm looking at the text because the first is, all living beings cycling through samsara. So that's the whole past and future lives. And then there's a place where we talk about where the text says, circling in the cyclic existence, that's past and future lives. But there's another place right before the Tsongkhapa's talking about generating the mind of enlightenment, generating bodhicitta, he talks about the four powerful rivers, which are aging, birth, aging, death, sickness, like those, that the powerful rivers of this psychic existence that drives us. And then he talks about the tight bonds of karma. So before we kind of move on to the next step, and obviously we did talk a little bit last time about, when we have this, when we're not distracted by the good times in this life, the pleasure grove, when we don't lose our focus, when we're focused completely, uncontrived, naturally, with a wish to get out of suffering, when we understand that we're in suffering. Renunciation, we understand that even the good things are tied up with suffering, and therefore we want to eliminate that and get out of psychic existence to achieve enlightenment. So that's how we know we have that. And then when we start talking about, okay, well, I have the renunciation, I want to become enlightened, what is the next thing that I have to develop in my mind? And it is this idea of bodhicitta. So the mind of enlightenment is bodhicitta. And before we even talk about bodhicitta, we have this idea of equanimity. Even before we start working on developing work on developing the mind of enlightenment, we first have to develop some kind of equanimity. And this is also tied up with past and future lives. So the classic way to develop equanimity is to contemplate, the relationships that we have. So there's a meditation, and actually I think I'll explain it, and then maybe we'll take just a couple minutes and we'll do the meditation. But the meditation is, we imagine before us that there's a person who's very dear, like the most dear people in our lives, and we think about them, and they've done something to benefit us. They give us some kind of happiness and pleasure, but we know from our own experience, it just even in this life, that there are those who bring us happiness today that tomorrow bring us sorrow. So just based on this small amount of information, like we're totally discriminating and favoring, thinking more highly of those who are dear to us, that they're dear to us, and we put them in a different position in terms of importance for ourselves. And then, thinking about how that really doesn't make sense. Every being wants happiness, just like me. And just like me, every being has challenges in getting that happiness. We're all sort of swimming in this soup, trying our best to be happy. We're all very equal in that. We're equal in our desire to be happy. We're equal in our problems. They may manifest differently, and they may manifest differently at a given time, but ultimately we're completely equal in that way. And so then thinking about, the next person would be, someone who we don't like, someone who we, I think in Buddhist circles, we have a hard time saying enemy, because I think we're all hopefully maybe subdued enough that we don't think of anyone as just an enemy, right? But we have people who annoy us, right? So that would be the category, like, okay, maybe you don't have enemies. None of us have enemies, but we have annoyers, right? Like the people who get on our nerves, the people who, we lose our patience with. And if we think about them, also, somebody who annoys me today can become my best friend tomorrow. Like they change roles. It's very fluid, right? The idea of loved one and enemy and stranger. Like these are all very fluid relationships or lack of relationship, right? So just because someone has done something that, or, doesn't causes me some amount of discomfort or seemingly causes me discomfort, that being is completely equal, to the one who is my beloved. And thinking about that and then, thinking of this stranger, and guess what? Everyone in the other two categories always started out as a stranger, right? So then not caring about strangers also becomes kind of arbitrary, right? So if we want to be logical, or if we want to have just reason behind contemplating that these positions are constantly in flux and that we are all the same in our desire to be happy, then it falls away, or the goal is for it to fall away, this idea of holding some dear and others not. And I would say, if you're a normal person like me, you have a really hard time with this, really, in practice. I think we have to always be continually reminding ourselves, right? But I know I have seen beings, and I would say Lama Zopa Rinpoche is one, who absolutely, he very clearly holds all beings as supremely precious, and he would prove it so many times, like the tiniest little creature that he would have so much loving care for. And when you see something like that, then you want to have that as well, right? When I first heard the teachings of equanimity, I had like almost an innate aversion to even the idea of it. And it's interesting. I didn't so much have much aversion, although probably I did, to me having equanimity, but I really didn't want other people to have equanimity. Like I want to be dear to some people, I want people to hold me as dear and supreme and beloved and more important. There's a hierarchy here, right? Our relationships are all like that. But when you stop, yeah, it's an honest thing, but when we stop and think about that, what equanimity is not, I'll say I had a profound misunderstanding of what that would look like, because equanimity to me sounded like equal and neutral. It sounded very neutral. And in a sense it is, in terms of a neutral way, like an unbiased way to think about and to behave towards sentient beings. So in that sense, it's neutral. But what we're talking about is elevating all sentient beings, elevating stranger, elevating annoying people to a being who we cherish deeply, who we wish every happiness for. So if you do four measurables, anyone who recites, you're familiar with four measurables, right? Like, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings never be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all beings dwell in equanimity, unaffected by attraction and aversion. Like these are four thoughts aimed at others that we, a prayer that we recite, an aspiration that we have. Having that feeling is having supreme love, like to really wish that every being really not have any suffering at all. And then, I love Rinpoche, like now, FPMT lineage, it is like not just to say, may all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May I myself alone cause them to have happiness and the causes of happiness. May I myself alone free them from every suffering. May I myself alone place them in the bliss of enlightenment. May I myself alone liberate them from attachment and aversion. Like these things, this strong aspiration, this is love. So equanimity, in that way, is a kind of love and compassion that my most beloved, in my best moments, I have that for my most beloved. But to have that for every living being, wow, what an aspiration, right? It's like I could have had a V8, like I'm just, satisfied with having, friends, enemies, strangers. Like, no, it could be so much more. Like to treasure every living being. And then there are countless, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but there's countless practices to help us to develop that. And then even as and most of them are prayers and things that we will recite as aspiration. But even as you recite it, you get the feeling like, wow, to be that, like, could I even do it? It feels, yeah, it's amazing to even contemplate for a minute, having a mind like that, let alone really, really, truly aspiring to it, right? You would get the sense of that. So before we work on the mind of enlightenment, before we work on developing bodhicitta, we have to start with this base of equanimity, right? Which comes from understanding our current situation, right? So that was part of, the renunciation, understanding the truth of suffering, and then thinking of every living being that is true. The truth of suffering is true for them as well. So from that perspective, like really wanting to develop that loving kindness. And I really am getting ahead of myself, but I want to pause there because I've talked too much. I'm looking at the time. That was a lot of me rattling. I would just love to open, and if it's a question, great. If it's a comment or I don't know, something, a thought or a feeling that came up for you, I'd love to create the space for that.
Bonnie, while you were talking, we had a retreat this weekend, and one of the assignments that Venerable Renee gave to people today, he picked they volunteered, right? But they volunteered, was it 7 or 8 people to do a brief meditation, and then he was going to comment and with a specific goal, and he was going to comment on those people, did they accomplish that goal or not? And when you were talking, it was funny because one of the ladies was talking about equanimity, and she said, and I just kind of fell in love with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and then it occurred to me that I got to love my husband the same way. And she said that it just brought this whole different different dimension to her marriage, which was just really awesome. And it struck me because you kind of said the same thing.
Yeah. Well, like the Lojong, when they talk about, see every being as your precious teacher. And a lot of times they're talking about those annoying ones, right? The ones that look annoying. But I had mentioned in the last class just this, I think it's a healthy spiritual paranoia that everyone is out to get you enlightened, right? That everyone, like all the Buddhas got together and they're like, okay, what, we got Bonnie here. What does she need? Here's what we're going to do. You're going to be like a great friend or whatever. And then you're going to betray her. And then you're going to just be constantly annoying. And, you guys are going to kind of just be bit players in the background, like strangers, but like a plan, right? And to walk around in the world, actually that's more of a tantric view, but I think like that healthy paranoia of like they can function that way for me, right? Like if I and this is where we get into, we're always looking. I'm always looking. I think it's natural to always look for like, what's the truth? Like I was talking to someone close to me about a problem, and I have this. I think for some people it's annoying. I always give other people the benefit of the doubt and try to like imagine, I don't know, just imagine some good thing that they're trying to do. And this person's like, but that's not really what they're doing. And in a way, you can say it doesn't matter what they think they're doing. And this is where we're like, we really can have 100% responsibility for our spiritual evolution. If I am doing what I should be doing, if I'm practicing, if I'm using it as the path, then it becomes the path. This is why even the idea of like a spiritual teacher, reliance on a spiritual teacher, what does that mean? And honestly, that is a loaded topic, as it very well should be. What it does not mean is abdicating your responsibility. Not in any way. I mean, you can be asking the Lama for instruction on your every moment of your day. But even in doing that, if you're really just abdicating, like giving it up to this guy, without an incredible amount of spiritual intellect and motivation behind it, then it's not real spiritual practice. The real spiritual practice is using that teacher and understanding that that they are not inherently anything from their own side. So now I have gotten ahead of myself to this idea of what ultimate reality is, how things truly exist. And it's funny, like you start on the path and you don't necessarily know anything about that, but we're developing all these things at, congruent, what am I, consecutively? No, not consecutively. What is it? Together at the same time. Concurrently. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So, remembering that the holiness of His Holiness the Dalai Lama is not something that I can argue inherently exists. And it might seem that way, and I might want to, and it might make me seem much more devoted if I argue with someone who doesn't believe that yes, he is holy, and yes, he is amazing, and and I can totally have that belief, and he can function that way for me. But we're missing something if we're trying to make that like some universal truth. The universal truth is that there's a blankness of all phenomena, and then how I experience that phenomena is coming from me, from dependent. We talk about dependent origination and emptiness. So depending on what? That's also a big topic. Depending on causes and conditions, okay. Depending on parts, but depending on labels that are coming from me because of things that I have said and done and thought in the past that are forcing me in any given moment to experience things in the way that I do. So that's why it's super important to set our motivation, right? Because that's part of how we're planting the seeds to achieve all of these realizations. So I guess before
Bonnie, I have a question.
Please.
I'm sorry. Did you say blindness? You cut out, so I wasn't quite sure.
Blank?
What did
maybe?
What did you? Oh, okay. Thank you.
Blank?
I thought you said blindness. Okay.
Blankness. Sorry. You can sort of think of it at like that, like a projector. So there's a blank screen. There's a blank, every sentient being or all phenomena is blank. And then something is imputed onto it. And where that something comes from is my karma. It's dependent upon, right, things. So I do feel like I'm talking too much, but I guess I'll rattle on, but please, I don't want to rattle on too much. I really want to create space for conversation. So another idea before we can develop this mind of enlightenment is this understanding of karma. So we're thinking of all sentient beings as having been our mothers. So that's part of the in the text. It says swept away by the current of 4 powerful rivers, tied by the tight bonds of karma, so hard to undo, caught in the iron net of self-grasping, completely enveloped by the total darkness of ignorance. This is the situation that I am in, and this is the situation that all living beings in samsara find themselves. Endlessly reborn in psychic existence, ceaselessly tormented by the 3 sufferings. So those 3 sufferings are the suffering of suffering, the suffering of change, and then the all-pervasive suffering, which is just the eligibility for the other 2 sufferings. Thinking that all mothers are in such a condition generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. So this idea of all mothers, that there's 2 ways to develop bodhicitta, 2 ways to develop great compassion. The one way is called 7-point cause and effect. So it's literally thoughts in your mind that when you have that strong, I can't say anything other than realization. You have that thought. One thought will trigger the next thought. So there's a causal relationship there. So again, we're taking past and future lives as a working hypothesis. And then 7-point cause and effect, again, coming from that perspective of equanimity. So imagining, and I didn't do the meditation on the 3, the stranger, the beloved, and the neutral person. But maybe I'll do this meditation and then, or maybe I'll do that after I kind of go through the 7-point cause and effect. So the first is recognizing that all beings have been our mothers. And you'll see so often it's like mother sentient beings, and also mother, because all sentient beings can be this treasure, like your precious, there's some lojangs that say like your precious teacher, they become your mother because they give birth to your enlightened self. If I'm interacting with sentient beings in a way that cultivates any of these realizations in my mind, then I can say, even, functionally, logically, in a sense, they are my mother. They have given birth, my interactions with them, they've given birth through interacting with them. They've given birth to my renunciation or my bodhicitta or my wisdom. Like the Prajnaparamita is like the mother of wisdom, who gives birth to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Traditionally, though, this is more the sense that literally through countless lives, we've been everything to each other. We have been enemies, we have been lovers, we have been strangers, we have been comrades, and we can imagine that every sentient being has been our mother. And we pick mother because even though, there are people who will have had negative relationships or have negative thoughts kind of wrapped around, their particular mother. If we're sort of objective, we could say, well, even the fact that I'm here. So even if I had a terrible mother, the very fact that I'm here walking on this earth means that she carried me like in her body for, roughly 9 months. And even just that is huge, someone to give birth to you. And then the fact that, especially humans, baby animals, they come out and they're toddling around or whatever, they are uneasy on their feet and then they're walking, right? A human, like we are completely helpless. We can't get any food on our own. We can't do anything on our own. So the fact that I'm alive says that someone was incredibly kind. And anyone who has children knows it's a 24/7 endeavor. And even a bad mother is, or if they gave you up for adoption or whatever the cases may be, they did something and they gave us some kindness. And so really, the first step is recognizing, after equanimity, right? We have equanimity and this idea of past and future lives. And from that perspective, then we just recognize that all beings have been our mothers, could have had that relationship, and then reflect on, and if it's problematic for you, just think, have been incredibly kind, whatever the kindest, most beneficial being in your life has been. If the meditation is hard for you, you can start somewhere else. You can say father or, friend or benefactor, whatever that is. And then really think about the kindness. Even the kindnesses that sometimes we take so much kindness for granted. There's nothing in our life that isn't frankly kind of miraculous. Like, like this pen, this pen that came from some hotel, it's like, it's a cheap thing. And so I have some idea of like value, but if I ever thought about like, okay, how expensive should a pen? Pencils are better because I know what is in a pencil, wood, lead, whatever, flint, whatever that is. But how much should this cost? Right? Think about how many sentient beings were involved in making this pen. So first you had to have like, all right, this has a different color top. It's green. So and there's ink in here. So people had to develop the dyes to make the plastics green, and then just the plastic itself and the coloring of it and the ink, getting the ink. And then the machines, all the machines that had to exist. I don't know anything. I should watch those shows. They have some show where they tell you how stuff is made. I don't know how a pen is made. A pencil would have been better, but I don't have one next to me. But I can imagine like all the plastic and everything. So all the machinery that's required to put this together. And then all the machinery that's required to make the machinery that's required for this. And then all the beings who work on all of those, and the beings who work in the factory that does this, and then all the beings who box it up and work on, putting it in the cardboard box for me. And then somebody has to ship it. And by the way, not only the people who are driving the trucks or the planes or whatever, but the people who built the roads that enable the trucks to get to the store. Oh, by the way, there's a store then that, somebody had to build this whole building. And it's, all right, it's not 24/7. It won't be like a 24/7 store, but countless hours that there are people in the store, people who built the store. And then I want a pen. So I get in my car and I go to the store and I pay, I don't know how much a pen is, $1 for a pen. But if I think of all the labor, and I feel like I paid for it, right? I feel like, well, I paid my $1. It's fair. Is it fair? Like, it's incredible. And I feel like I paid for it. So then I don't think like, oh, the kindness the kindness that I have this pen. I could never have a pen on my own. I could never make a writing implement. The simplest thing I have. And I'm sorry if this is a crappy example, but the simplest thing I have, I couldn't create this on my own. And there are literally countless beings that were involved in getting this to me. And if that isn't kindness, their lives, their energy, all went into this. So then, like, this should cost $1 million. And it's only through the kindness of sentient beings that I can have it for $1, And this kind of thinking, like, so maybe I didn't pick the best example, but this is step 2. This is remembering the kindness. And if we remember the kindness, then, you can feel as much as you can get into it. And I wish I did a better job. I'm glad Venerable Renee isn't going to tell me how good of a job I did on, because what I wanted to have happen is remember the kindness. And you remember the kindness, and there's a feeling that like a verklempt kind of feeling, like I owe them, I owe them something. And that's the wish. So now we're talking about 7-point cause and effect. So 1 is remembering all beings have been my mother. And 2 is remembering the kindness. And you can look around in your, find whatever the example is, but, kindness in ways that don't even register in our daily life. If we stop and we think and we look, it's overwhelming. The kindness that we have gotten from other sentient beings. And so then, the next thing is like, I want to repay them. Like I want to give something back. I owe them. I owe them. And then immediately, like, it's almost like 3 and 4, there's almost like no, so it's like, remember the kindness, and then uncontrived, you want to try to repay that. And the next thing is, you develop love. So what is love? It's like wanting them to be happy. Like, oh, I want them to be happy. Like, I want the truck driver and the people who worked in the store and the people who built the store and the people who, I want them all to be happy. I genuinely want them to have the things that they need and that they want. And that's the next kind of uncontrived, want to repay them. I want to give them. That love is a give. Love is I want to give them the things that will make them happy. And then if we've been in Dharma class and we've talked about samsara and psychic existence and karma, the next step will come, which is a realization of, I want them to be happy. But it's like if you see a child and they fall and hurt themselves and you just go up and give them ice cream. Like, first you have to like tend to their wound. Like they're suffering. They're here in this soup of samsara. They're eligible for all kinds of suffering. And if you really go into Lam Rim and you really look at the other kinds of existence that we could have, the other realms that we could have been born in, I really didn't talk about, kind of just glossed over, the freedoms and endowments of this human life. But there are so many other kinds of existence we could have. Again, using past and future lives as a working hypothesis, but we can imagine, we can see beings that are in incredible suffering, and we can imagine that could be, whole entire realms of that, craving beings, hell beings, even animals, just having to survive and have that be your focus. so there's so many kinds of suffering that we are eligible for. So then developing this compassion. And, that's where love and compassion are two different things. Love is, I want to give you all the things that will make you happy. But compassion is coming from that place of wisdom of like, whoa, before you can enjoy that, to really be happy, I have to take away your suffering. I have to get rid of that first. What fun is it? It's like, imagine that there's and there probably is, like, imagine that there's, a Michelin star restaurant, and you put it in the middle of wherever there's a bunch of hungry people. And, how much would you enjoy that meal? Like, it doesn't matter how good it is. It wouldn't be good anymore, right? Because there's hungry beings right outside the door. So, what kind of person, how could you, right? So the compassion is wanting to take away the suffering, wanting them not to have that kind of suffering. And then, when you think like, I don't want them to suffer, I don't want beings to be hungry. I don't want war. I don't want these terrible things. I don't want these for anyone. Then the next thing comes, after you develop, so you've got, recognize all beings as your mother, remember their kindness, wish to repay them, develop love, develop compassion. And then the next one, it comes. I have to do something. I have to do something. Take responsibility. I have to do something. And then think about like, okay, so the next step is, well, what can I do? What can I do? So in my current situation, not much. I can do some small thing. I can put a Band-Aid on the situation. But if you're thinking of all mother sentient beings, we can feel like very inadequate. There's nothing, this is why Thousand Arm Chenrezig has 1,000 arms. You know why? Because they prayed to have 1,000 arms. They put in, and next week we have got to talk about karma, but they created the causes to have 1,000 arms. Buddhas have countless emanation bodies. Why? Because they created the causes for that, because they had these kinds of aspirations. So it becomes really obvious in my current situation, I can't do much. So I must change my situation. I must become enlightened. I must develop these realizations in my own heart and mind. Then I can help. Then there's room to help. Because right now, my ego is like taking up all the oxygen in the room, all the space. I work for me. I want to work for all sentient beings. So we're changing the purpose of our lives. So I admit I don't have that, but I have vows. What do those do? Well, they help me to become that. They start steering me in that direction. And little by little, my capacity changes, our capacity for kindness, our capacity to hold other living beings as important grows, right? The Lojong is great for that. Actually, Lojong is like mind training, right? That's actually what it means. It's like stretching. And you can think of it like that. It's like, if you just grab something and you pull it, it'll snap and break. But there's so many things that if you just gradually, slowly, but consistently are applying that little bit of pressure, you find that your capacity can grow exponentially. And that's exactly what happens. So this is one way to develop that. And then Lojong is the other. So I think you've all heard of Tonglen, the giving and taking practice. That's another one. That's, in the two methods, there's this 7-point cause and effect, and then there's the Lojong, which includes Tonglen. Those are the methods to achieve bodhicitta. And that's why that hopefully you're familiar. One of the other classes that I taught, we talked about 8 verses for training the mind. Like all of these Lojong things, they're just incredible, pithy instruction that if we set our minds on them, if we allow ourselves to steep in them, it radically changes who we are, and radically increases our capacity. So I am going to do a meditation, but once again, we've had less interaction this time, and it's probably because of me. I will say it's because of me. But can we spend a couple minutes? Because there's a lot, and I would just love to know what your thoughts are. If you have questions, if something resonated or something didn't resonate or seems problematic. I'm going to be quiet in the hopes that someone will chime in.
Okay, I'll chime.
Thanks.
You bet. One of the things I wanted to comment about, you talked about the bodhisattvas making a decision about who's going to play what role in our lives in order to hopefully expedite us becoming a Buddha, right? When I was 6 years old, I was in my aunt's kitchen and I looked outside, and I remember this so distinctly. I had the thought that the whole world was designed to test me. And it was more, everybody was in on the secret. I was the only one who did not know about this. Now, it was more of a Christian view, right? They were going to test me to see if I was good. But when you told that story, here you gave that analogy, I thought, yeah, it's like I had that idea at 6, lost it, needless to say later, because obviously that was not how reality was presented to me. The other thing I had, the same aunt's house, she's driving in the car, I'm in the back seat, she's picked me up from school. I look out the window and I kind of go, oh, I'm conscious.
Wow.
Yeah, it was sort of
Wow.
like kaboom. And that was, just self-awareness. And again, it's been, I can look back on it and remember it. But then, of course, needless to say, life intervenes with those kinds of assessments or aha experiences, which you're surrounded by people who really don't think that's what's happening. Yeah.
Well,
So I want to share.
amazing. So first of all, amazing wisdom.
It's what kiddies have. They just don't articulate. Because I wouldn't have told anybody about either of these, because they would have thought I was off in la la land.
Some of the best thoughts come when somebody else might think you're in la la land. It's no surprise though. If you think about it, if you were really to meditate on and contemplate like the incredible rare good fortune of this human existence, like how miraculous and there's so many examples, scriptural examples. It's like when you think of countless lifetimes, so to suddenly be in this situation, which we call precious human rebirth, it is like hitting the more than the lottery. It's an amazing jackpot. They have these things like a turtle who's swimming in the ocean or whatever and pops his head up once every 100 years or whatever, and then somehow it ends up in this yolk. Like the chances of that happening, like these crazy things. But the amount of goodness, so that is a incredible good karma. Like even the worst person on this planet, this human rebirth is such an amazing gift. And it's no surprise that at the same time, like when we're young, we have a lot of good seeds, you could say, are sort of popping. A lot of there's a lot of goodness happening. And then, like you said, we learn. We learn all the wrong things, right? We learn, and it's not even that anyone's teaching us. It's just it's habit,
Pervasive. It's
right?
pervasive also. You're totally surrounded by energy that is not focused on spirituality.
But it's coming from us though, because we've had countless lives where we weren't focused on it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But here we are again, right? Here we are again, sitting in this environment, talking about these ideas. That it's a miracle. It's
Yep.
amazing.
I agree.
It
Love it.
really is. And you're coming back to it. And it's like that wisdom, recognizing that wisdom. To think, and especially I think at least probably most of us come from Judeo-Christian kind of background. It almost seems crazy or megalomaniac to think like I could be a Buddha, like who do you think you are? Like we got other people to do that stuff. We've got God, Jesus, those people, those beings, not you. From a Buddhist perspective, we're really saying, I want to become that. I want to become the highest being. That means I have to think that I can. And that is like, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
Because in a crazy way, like we're very egotistical, but then also it's part of the same thing, right? Low self-esteem. I can never be that. Well,
So I must say, I had the good fortune of being taught by the Sisters of Charity of Leavenworth. And one of the clarion calls that was repeated was that we should be Christ to the world.
wow.
Yeah,
That's
I
good
know.
fortune too.
Yeah, I have
Yeah.
a great deal of appreciation for these ladies, you can imagine.
Yeah.
How extraordinary. Yeah, yeah. They didn't, I don't remember anybody being super concerned about the falderall that Catholicism could entail in terms of going to Mass and obligations and all of that. But definitely that Christ to the world was repeated to us a lot.
Amazing. And then
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you're a
And again,
child,
good fortune.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I grew up Catholic too. And, as much as I've heard, and forgive me, I'm sorry, I've got a little allergy. Don't really want to do this on camera, but
For all posterity.
yeah,
Yeah, I have allergies.
not that
And I
anyone's going to look, but
can be on mute.
yeah. But I was also raised Catholic, and I've heard people say, they get hell and brimstone. I also had some great fortune that I got a lot of the like be a bodhisattva, right? Make me a channel of your peace where there's, hunger, despair, let me
Yeah.
bring hope, like, yeah, it's the same thing. And yeah, there can be truth found in many different paths. So
Yeah, definitely.
that's
Definitely.
definitely bodhisattva ideal. Yeah. Michael, did you have something, or were you just indulging me because I was desperately seeking participation?
I was thinking, when you said earlier, I was thinking, whenever I hear the words in my own head, it's not what you said, it's how you said it. I always have to, for me, I always have to follow up with, it's not what you heard, it's how you heard it.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that really, for me, that really mixes with the idea that of that nothing is as it seems.
Yeah.
Because how I heard it is not how it was, and how it was said is not how it was.
And
Right?
we know it's the truth. We know that's true, right? We
And we
know
don't
it's
want
true,
we don't want to believe it's true.
but we know it.
You know
If
it.
we stop and think about it, we know. But you're right. We don't want to believe. We want there to be things that are self-existent and truth, the truth, the universal truth. And often we want like the truth to be my version, of course. Like, oh, let all the world get on my page. Yeah. Anyway. Wow. So the
I
time.
was just going to say, for me, whether or not what we hear is, the truth, or if we it's kind of like reading a text message. You only hear, the tone, you it's not exactly what the person meant. It's usually in your mind that makes it up, of what you believe.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, ah. So the Buddhist speech, ah, like they say when the Buddha would utter anything, like it would, they say Buddhist speech is like all languages, uh, of all beings could understand in the way that they need. So the simplest thing, right? And Lord Buddha would teach something. We know this. We all go into a Dharma class and everybody kind of hears something different. It's, yeah, we're touching at something, just that truth of non-truth, that dependent origination, that non-self-existent, not coming from its own side, not inherent, not independent truth, the truth of that. Anyway, I really appreciate your time, and I do want to do a meditation before we close. And so I'd like it to be around bodhicitta. And I think, let's stop and try to develop that equanimity. So going back to the idea of friend, stranger, enemy, I think let's take some time together to contemplate those three different kinds of being and how they are all the same in their suffering, how transient those positions are, and put them on an equal footing of importance. And then when we have them held in equanimity, let's take a minute to contemplate how over countless lifetimes each one of them has been infinitely kind to us, cared for us in every way. And then thinking of their incredible kindness, thinking that we should repay that, how much I want to repay that kindness. How much I want them to be happy, to have everything they need. And then remembering that just like us, they're suffering. And they can't really have that happiness until that suffering is taken away. And deciding that we're going to take that away. We're going to take that suffering from them. But how? In my current situation, there's so little I can do to help others. I must develop my heart and mind. I must become a Buddha. It's the only way to help, to truly help. And as much as you're able, really identify with that determination, the purpose of your life, the purpose of this human life, the best purpose would be to use it to become this. And so with that same determination, let's dedicate. And next class, we'll talk about karma, and we'll talk about wisdom, emptiness, kind of give a little bit of a primer on karma. And then we'll talk about wisdom. But let's actually dedicate. So what we're doing here is we're taking exactly what it says. We're taking the merit, the activity that we just did, this time that we've just spent together, and we're dedicating it, because every action of body, speech, and mind has results. And so we're saying, let the result of this be, forgive me, I have a timer. Okay. Let the result of this time that we spent together be that I actually do achieve these things. That's what we're saying. We're investing it. We're putting it in that piggy bank, or the Buddha bank. Yewadina dudan lama sangye drugyone droha chikyang mahalupa dehi sala go Shog Jang Chub Sam Chog Rinpoche Ma Ke Panam Kye Gyuchi Ke Panyam Pa Me Payam Gong Ne Gong Du Pawa Shung. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta, may the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that which is not arisen not diminish, but increase forevermore. Thank you. And now we'll do a long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Gangri Rawe Korwe Jinkam Dear Pendang Dewa Malu Jungwe Ne Chenre Zigwan Tenseng Gyatso Yi Jape Site Badu Tengyur Chi. And for the long life of all of our holy teachers, all of our Dharma friends on the path who help us for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all of their holy wishes be instantly fulfilled. May our own aspirations be quickly fulfilled. May we achieve all the realizations of the path, up to and including the great enlightenment. And may we invest all living beings in that same enlightenment and bliss. And I thank you so much for your time and your good hearts. And I look very forward to next week. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you.